On live. So welcome to the travel writing panel, and I'm Emma Wallace, and I have not written a travel book, so I'm going to be deferring to these lovely people and asking them some questions about their books. So shall we start off, and if we just go to each person and you can kind of say who you are and give your little kind of author bio and the sort of books that you write, and then we'll dive into some questions. So shall we go to Emma first, because you're the first thumbnail on my screen.
Hi everyone, Emma Nichols, and I write lesbian fiction, predominantly romance with a bit of an edge, and usually they involve, the settings are in different locations, quite a lot in France, but also span to Greece, and recently, of course, Cosa Nostra in Sicily. So location is really important in my work, for sure.
Fab. I have to think whether or not to mute myself, and then for just a short period of time. Okay, so let's go to Catherine next.
Hi, I'm Catherine Lane. I also write lesbian romance, mostly sports-oriented lesbian romance. My locations are much more mundane than Emma's, but I always try to include my location as almost a character in, my books. Certainly, Romancing the Kicker had Las Vegas, and it really stood in for a whole bunch of metaphors for the characters. And so I really love exploring locations. A lot of my books are set in Los Angeles, which is where I'm from, and that's great too, because I get to go explore a lot of the city that I haven't normally seen.
Thank you. Let's go to Bray next.
So I'm Bray Willows, and I write mostly spec fic, so science fiction and fantasy with a bit of dystopian stuff thrown in. And I love using locations all over the world, or like making up locations in other worlds, which, makes things a lot easier sometimes because I can simply decide where something is. But I love using Greece, and my next one will be in Scotland. So, and I've used Italy as well, and France. So yeah, location is I love being able to explore the world as well as make new ones.
Wonderful. And Fiona.
Now I'm muted. Hi, I'm Fiona Zed, and I write mostly contemporary lesbian and bisexual women's romance. I've done historical before, and it was a fun exploration of the African continent, that the way it was way back in the day. I love traveling, so I typically like to incorporate where I am or where I have been into my work. And so my latest books have been set in Spain, where I live now, Italy, the Amalfi Coast, that I fell completely in love with, Costa Rica, places like that. So I often just relive my travels in my books and invite my readers to travel and explore with me. And they, again, they're also characters, not used metaphorically, just like they're just very strongly there. The sense of place, the food, the type of people you run into, even the sky. So I love it.
Wonderful. So I think at least some of you live in completely different places to where you're from. I know Bray definitely does. And Emma, am I right in thinking that you lived in France for a while? So my question probably is, those of you that do a lot of traveling and have potentially decided to then live somewhere different to where you first come from, how does that sort of influence your writing and your characters? So actually, do you want to kind of wave at me if that is the case for you, that you live somewhere else from where you're from? Bray and Fiona. Okay, let's go to Bray first then.
Yeah, I'm actually from LA, where Catherine is now. And my Afterlife series was set in LA primarily, and then moved on to other regions. I love traveling for the inspiration. Like, I love Spain. I absolutely adore Spain, and I'd move there in a heartbeat. I'm really jealous, Fiona, that you're over there. But I think it's really inspiring, and I love being somewhere and being so caught up in the culture and like Fiona said, the food and the sky, that it just takes me somewhere else and allows me to create something entirely new. And I find when I do travel that new stories just flood in, which is really exciting. And I love England. And, you know, it is 4 degrees and it's been raining for 97,000 days. And I miss the sunshine quite desperately. So travel allows me to get away from that as well.
Fab. How about you, Fiona?
Basically, they said what I had to say about traveling and writing, but I'll say more stuff. I was born in Jamaica. I lived in the US for a long, long time. And then I just moved here to Madrid about a year ago officially. And so I often joke with my friends that the weather here in Madrid is very much like Atlanta weather. So sometimes you can feel like in certain ways that I haven't really gone anywhere. But I do love to just mix and match all the different places that I've been and toss it into my books. And somehow it can also feel like timeless and placeless in a way. But even as I'm really, really enjoying being in a place and bringing that setting and those people and that world into my books and inviting my readers to be there. But yeah, like having been born in Jamaica and then lived in the States and being here and traveled to so many really interesting places, I just feel like the movement makes brings new stories to life, and also brings old stories, like brings new energy to them. You know, the story of, you know, an older woman and a younger woman meeting, it's infused differently when it's set in Greece. It feels differently when it's in this mountain town in the middle of Switzerland, you know, so I love that.
Amazing. So I am going to now jump in with another question. So do you prefer to write about characters visiting a place that they've never been to before, or do you prefer to write about characters who live in that sort of destination? And shall we go to Catherine first?
Sorry. That's such an interesting question. And just reflecting back on many of the books I've written, it's always one in one. So one character is the native and she's there and she has a very different perspective than the newcomer who's coming in. And, you know, it sort of works both ways where they get to see the place, the setting, which is very central to a lot of my books, through each other's eyes. So I think that, you know, I've never realized that I've done that until you asked that question. So thank you for making me reflect on that.
Wonderful. How about you, Emma?
I think I agree. You know, with my characters, one of them is usually the native, and the other one is coming in. There's always an environment that somebody's stable in, and an environment that's coming into, and that's the place in that scenario. So, yeah. Or sometimes I've had as with Ariana, the place was the setting they both met in, and one left and one came back. So, but the place has changed and the characters changed, and so it becomes a different setup completely, and different play out of the story than it might have been before. So, yeah, I think you know, place for me, as others have said, is like a character, and they're a character in the book. So it's the way that character plays out with your two then main characters or whoever many you have that makes the difference.
Wonderful. Bray, how about you?
I don't know. Like Catherine, I think I'm trying to figure it out now. I've never really thought about it. I think my series in LA, all of my characters, my primary characters are Greek gods. So I think they started out in Greece, but they've ended up in LA. Yeah, my characters travel a lot, I think. I think they move around a lot. I don't think I've got anybody that's actually from somewhere, which is probably I'm not really from somewhere either. So I suppose that's kind of me, which is a lovely psychological thing that I'll now have to ponder about my writing.
Art imitating life.
Yes, yeah.
Awesome. And Fiona, what about you?
So for me, most of my characters, like Brie, they travel. They travel to different places versus being from somewhere. 'Cause I want to feel like I have an authentic sort of vision of the area. And I think it's difficult to, it's not impossible, but I do want to be sure that I honor the place that I'm talking about. And so it's difficult to properly honor it, in my opinion, somewhere where you've sort of only visited briefly and then try to sort of be in the mindset of someone who's from that area. So typically my characters are visiting and they have that awe and that appreciation, and then they encounter someone from there. And I usually only do one POV character. So you just get the perspective of someone who's visiting, appreciating, and absorbing and loving a new and different culture. I have had a book that was set in an African country, and that I remember doing a ton of research and trying to get it right and not be like that, you know, someone who makes all these stereotypes about a place and a culture. So yeah, definitely. And I think the places that I've had books that are about natives were about Jamaica, where I'm from, like I said 20 times ago, I think. And I think I have some American characters as well. And I've been in America, or I had been for, oh my God, 20 years. So I feel like I can speak pretty well about being there and about the culture, at least the culture in Florida and Atlanta. Yeah.
Awesome. So obviously things are a little bit different at the moment because of COVID and travel restrictions and things, but would you normally go in person to visit the place that you're going to be writing about? And I suppose this is kind of a two-part question. Do you go to a place and think it would be really cool to set a book here, or do you choose the location and then make plans to go and visit that location, assuming that you can because of the travel restrictions? And let's go to Bray first.
Both, I think, is my answer to that. Yeah, like I said, I do find a lot of inspiration when I do travel. So sometimes I'll wind up somewhere and just think, oh, this would be an amazing setting for that. But then I like to go to places to research things too. Like the my work in progress that I'm just about to start redrafting is ancient Greece. So I had to go to understand it, like Fiona was saying, and get a way better sense of the culture and the people and everything. And I was very fortunate to have some friends who lived in Greece, who were Greek, and able to give me an even deeper sense of it. But I think it helps with plot points too, that maybe you haven't considered. So like I was at an ancient ruin and I was trying to figure out how my character was going to escape. And because of where I was standing, I was able to look across the lake and suddenly I understood how she was going to escape. Whereas if I hadn't gone, I wouldn't have seen that. I wouldn't have understood the physical relationship to the land that she was going to have. So I think it works for me both ways. I think it can give you a whole different sense of feeling and tone to put into your novel if you can actually visit it in person. But, you know, Google Maps with the little man you can drop is quite helpful.
Awesome. Shall we go to Catherine next?
Well, I think you're a little bit more adventurous than I am, Ray, because I would never write about someplace that I haven't been. Luckily, however, I've traveled quite a bit at a previous job that we were traveling all the time. So I've been really lucky in the places that I've been. But interestingly, once again, I'm thinking about my books in a whole different way. So thank you very much for this. You know, the places that they're set, Los Angeles, San Francisco, and Vegas are places that I've been quite a bit to. So I don't know, maybe I'm gravitating towards those ideas that are very well set in my mind, because I think you're right. I think when you can actually imagine a location, then you can bring it in as, you know, more of a character or more as a commentary on what the people are going through. In Romancing the Kicker, I wanted one of them to be in, you know, very much off the Vegas Strip. And so I had very clear ideas in my head because I have driven those neighborhoods. And I think you're right, Bray. I think it makes it a lot easier to imagine to sort of create your characters in your novel when you can literally imagine them in the setting.
Thank you. Can we go to Fiona next?
Sure, as I unmute myself. Typically, when I travel, I get inspired to set a story there. My favorite story so far is called it's like a collection of 3 novellas, To Italy with Love. And I was on the Amalfi Coast, and it just took my breath away. And I imagine, and it was almost like the characters came to me and whispered, it would be amazing just to have a wedding here. Imagine getting married here. Imagine having drama here. Imagine the setting of heartbreak and first lust and, you know, all these different things. So like for me, usually when I'm somewhere, the characters will appear and speak to me and basically badger me into setting a novel or a short story or a novella in that area. And for me, one of the best things about this whole setup is whenever I reread my story, I can go back to where I was in my mind. Like I can visit there again. And it's a sort of like reliving, re-experiencing and re-enjoying that place.
Awesome. So I think I'm going to ask some of the questions that have been sent in by people, and I'm going to try and get that to come back up. So where's it gone? So I'm going to kind of combine 2 of these questions actually. So M.A. Binfield asked about where would you really, really like to set a book? And Evie Bancroft asked, when international travel is feasible again, where would you like to go? So I think I'm going to kind of combine those 2 and ask you, sort of, assuming that the next place that you travel to is somewhere where you're going to set a book, where would that place be? And let's go to Emma first.
Wow, that's okay. That's a really interesting question, because this is probably a bizarre answer, but I have an idea of setting a location in someone's mind. And so actually that is where the location is. It's not anywhere in the world. It's coming through that. So it's a completely different kind of style of book. So it's very interesting. And I think also, to go back to the previous question, you can know the 7 wonders of the world exist, or the 10 wonders as there are now, and you can imagine what that feels like, and you could even go so far as to feeling what it feels like to be there. So you can still write for something that you haven't actually experienced, and of course the experiencing of it might just make a notch of a difference in the way that you can articulate that on the page. But I do think for most of our readers, they probably have never experienced the 10 wonders in the world. And so therefore, actually, however we can write it, the best that we can write it, is fantastic for them, because that's what they want to experience in that sense. So yeah, I mean, do you have to experience everything to be able to write it? Absolutely not. Is it right to fact check and to sensitize? Absolutely yes, absolutely, without doubt. But I don't think as an author you should hold yourself back either, because everyone's experience is also different.
Absolutely. Shall we go to Fiona next? Where would you next like to travel to?
I've always wanted to go to New Zealand, actually. I know everyone wants to go there now because, it's COVID-free, basically. And so I would set a book there as if it came to me and wanted to be there. But I just want to explore and breathe it all in. I feel like I just love traveling, and that's one of my biggest passions. And then because writing it's pretty equal to it passion wise, I just end up having to just like having this desire to write whatever I see, and they come together. But yeah, my work in progress is set in Atlanta, that a lot of them are set in, and then this made up kingdom. So maybe if I do go to New Zealand, the kingdom will be somewhat like New Zealand. I guess we'll see.
Use it for inspiration.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I just thought of something else that I think I'll throw out to ask you, because we've talked about destinations, but maybe we should also talk about the actual physicality of traveling somewhere. So not just having your book set in a faraway location, but how your characters might travel to those locations, and whether you have kind of plot points that happen during their journey. So maybe I will go to Catherine first for that one.
I think I do better with the other question, but
you can answer the other question as well.
Okay. Yeah, I don't normally gravitate towards the journey books, two characters on a journey. So I'm not sure that's really up my alley, but for the other question, it would definitely be like anywhere. At this point, I get excited when I go to the grocery store. I'm thinking about my next book, and the ice cream aisle in the grocery store. But yes, so yeah, I mean, location is so vitally important, and I think everybody experiences travel completely differently. Actually getting on a plane or getting in the car is not my favorite part of traveling. I know people like, my wife, she'll go on a road trip anywhere for anything. But me, it's the actually when you're there and experiencing it and running around and trying to find out what makes this place tick, which really makes me excited. So I don't think I answered your question, but hopefully you'll let me off the hook and move on to Bray.
That's absolutely fine. Bray, would you like to go next?
Sure. My next book that I'm about to begin in January is set in Scotland. So I'm hoping come 2021, I can actually get up there. We have a scheduled break for January, but the likelihood that we'll be able to go is probably pretty slim. But that's my next one. As far as where I want to go, anywhere with sunshine, really. Fiona's going to find me on her doorstep any minute. Just sunshine, really. I'd love to do an island one, I think. I have my I think second book in the Furies was set in Haiti. And that was a lot of fun to write. But I'd like to maybe try another island somewhere. New Zealand would be lovely. But really, all I can think about is sunshine right now. I'm obsessed. So, Scotland in January, not going to be sunny. So But as far as travel, like actually moving from place to place, I don't think I write about that either. I do suggest when I work with authors to tell them to slow down and take advantage of those moments of travel to show some character stuff. Particularly if they're traveling together, that's a good kind of element of conflict that you can throw in. And in LA, where you're driving for 3 hours to get to work every day, that can be quite useful as far as reflection time. But no, I don't think I've ever written anything where they're actually traveling together. I mean, some of mine fly, so that's quite useful. But you've given me something to ponder anyway.
Maybe for your next book, you'll have something about them going on the train or something.
Yeah.
We'll see. Emma, what about you? Have you written how the characters actually travel to destinations?
I was muted, sorry. Boats have come into my work recently, and moving on a barge and all that kind of thing which is kind of random, really. I hadn't thought about it that, in that sense, but yeah, the way people, as Bray said, the way people travel has to be delivering something to the story. Otherwise, I have talked with other authors at points about writing a story that's set on a train and it is all about the train journey. Well, that works fine. Like, you've got The Girl on the Train, which is a fantastic book. So yes, if the setting is about travel and travel related, then it's different. It's the travel movement is then the the character in the book, as opposed to getting somewhere for the sake of getting somewhere, if that makes sense.
Fiona, do you want to have a go at answering that one as well? Have you written about characters physically traveling?
I don't think so. But honestly, like, the books have sort of blended together. I'm trying to think of all the books that I've written, and I have 3 or 4 pen names. And so I think over all those books or names, there are probably 30 books, maybe 15, 20, I don't know, a lot of books. And so I don't know. I can't think of having written about a journey unless there was something dramatic happening during the course of that journey to somewhere else. So I don't think so. I really don't. And again, that is something to ponder.
Okay, I am going to ask another question if I can get my chat box to come back up. Where's it gone? There it is. Okay, so I think this is a really good question. Bev Joy asks, are there any locations that you definitely would not want to write about? And I suppose I'll also add on to that, are they places that you've been? Or are they just places where you kind of think to yourself, no. And let's go to Emma first.
Thanks, Bev. It is a great question, and I think the answer is no. There isn't anything setting-wise that I wouldn't choose to write about, and the only thing that's really important about that is that it fits the genre. Because if it doesn't, because I could write about a romance in a prison cell, but it's got to appeal to people. It has to be fit the story at the end of the day. And you can I've started with settings and I've started with characters, and you have to just make sure that they complement each other. But I love the idea of thinking broadly about the setting actually, and starting with that and saying, then go from there, what characters would be in this and how does this work as a romance, as a thriller, as a, whatever it is. That's cool. Yeah.
Awesome. Shall we go to Catherine next?
Yeah, I agree with Emma. I'm not sure there is any place I wouldn't set a book. I mean, obviously it would have to work with your setting and your characters and what your thematics, what you're trying to say about life and love. So yeah, I mean, it all has to fit together. I don't know. My initial response was maybe the desert, but I love the desert. So I could see a million different scenarios where this sort of, hot, dusty place is, creating tension and feelings and atmosphere for the characters. So yeah, I'm not sure I would, but once again, thank you for that question, because it really, these questions are really sort of making me sort of step outside of my, myself and sort of thinking about the process. And that's great. Thank you so much.
Bray, how about you?
I'm so glad Catherine said that, because I couldn't think of anywhere I wouldn't set a story except the desert. I hate the desert so much, but that's because I was a child in the desert for quite a big chunk of my life, and God, I hate it so much. So if the desert ever comes into my work, it's going to be because somebody's dead or dying, or there's been some kind of tragedy, or massive black moment, because God, I hate it so much.
So if there's some desert in your writing, we know to check in on you and make sure you're okay.
Yes. Yeah, I'm probably in a very dark place. Yeah.
Fiona, what about you?
That's funny, because I actually wrote it wasn't the whole thing in the desert, but I have a story set somewhat in the desert, and I loved it. Like, I loved going to the desert myself, to Namibia a few years ago, and it was incredible. The sunrise was spectacular. And, unlike Bray, I wasn't there for years. So I'm sure it's a whole different experience. But yeah, the sunrise, the sunset, the wind through those little water-starved trees was amazing. And so it brought up immediately like characters in a setting, and maybe I am very much romanticizing my experience, but it was amazing. And yeah, like Emma and Catherine, I don't think there's anywhere that I would not set a book. Even in a prison, a romance is possible. Even in, a hole in the ground, a romance is possible. I actually had an interesting scene where my characters were buried under snow in the ground, and they were managing to, get to know each other better. So yeah, I think there's, the whole world is a possibility. The whole world, it's all open, and I love it.
Amazing. So I think you've all kind of agreed on that you would be willing to kind of explore all different destinations. So another question that we've had from Laura is, do you find it scary to visit perhaps countries where you don't speak the language, and presumably places where you're going to research, or I suppose if you're traveling just generally? And let's go to Bray first.
I think that's a good question. I like to at least have some idea of the language before I go, because I think it's just the right thing to do, to try. And so, I've tried to learn at least fledgling Greek and Italian and Spanish so that I can get by in these countries. I have to admit, I didn't try Flemish when I was in Belgium, and my French is appalling. Fortunately, my wife Robin, her French is pretty good. So between the two of us, we managed to do that okay. I think other countries are actually way further ahead about English and having English as a second language. So you can usually get by, particularly if you're in the cities. When you're on the outskirts, it becomes a little harder. But I never let language stop me, ever, because I think you can find a way around that if you really want to go somewhere.
Awesome. And I think often if you're going somewhere to research something, you are going to be in those kind of less touristy areas, aren't you, where you might experience more of a language barrier than, as you said, if you're in a big city where you're more likely to come across people that speak English.
Yeah, absolutely. But that makes it fun.
Mhm.
You know, looking at signs and thinking, you know, in Greek, and you're looking at a triangle and a circle with a line through it, and you think, what does that say? And you're on a road trying to go somewhere, but it just makes it fun. So for me, it's a challenge that I really enjoy.
Do you find it exciting more than scary?
Absolutely.
Emma, what about you?
Yeah, no, language should never be a barrier. And you know, and we're talking here really underneath it, for those of us that write romance, the language of love, and the language of love is consistent across the continent. So, can I speak multiple languages? No, I cannot. But you know, I respect every continent and every country and their language, their customs, and I would ingratiate myself into those things when I go and explore those places. So yes, there's a quizzical mind also to say, whoa, I wonder what that means, I wonder that, and you can ask questions about that, and you know, if you engage in the culture, it doesn't matter what language you're speaking, actually, that people like to engage with you. And you can, you know, I have children who engage in France with people they don't speak French with, and they've had multiple conversations, and it's beautiful to watch. So one should never feel bashful or insecure or anything about trying to engage in conversation in another language. It's an amazing and wonderful experience. And you're not trying to write a book through that language. That's really important. And it would be disrespectful to try to write a book in a language that you cannot write. That's why we have translation and services and all those kind of things. So the balance in writing is to get that level of appreciation and respect for that culture. That for me, that's my interpretation of it anyway. But no, please, if anybody's doing that, don't let language or anything get in the way. Don't let anything get in the way. Right.
Awesome. Catherine, how about you?
Well, I'm going to answer the question a little bit more personally. I'm horribly dyslexic. So, you know, I still struggle with English. So all other languages are off the table for me. But yes, I mean, when I was in my 20s, I lived abroad. I, you know, studied abroad. I, you know, traveled extensively before I had that job where, you know, it was international. So somehow it did never stop me. I mean, I think, yeah, Bray is right that a lot of people, and Emma too, that most people are willing to meet you halfway. And if you can't get halfway, they're willing to come all the way for you. So I think that language really isn't a barrier. Although I will say that, you know, now I travel with my family, with my wife and our son, and it's a very different experience traveling with the family than gallivanting around the world when you're 20. You know, I think language barrier then comes in because you feel responsible for, you know, the safety of your family in a way that you wouldn't. And I don't mean to turn this to a negative, you know, perspective, but yeah, I mean, I do think language is super, super important. So yeah, I mean, I think that as an American, you need to go places and not be American. And I know that's sort of weird, but you know, try to, you're a visitor in their country and you have to respect, you have to respect what the country is and try to enter on their terms and not try to turn the country to your own terms.
Absolutely. Fiona, what about you?
I love languages, and so whenever I go somewhere, I try to learn like the very, very basics. In terms of being frightened to visit somewhere because I didn't know the language, I remember when I was first contemplating visiting Thailand, I was super, super nervous. I was visiting on my own. I was going to be there for about a month, and it was so different from any language that I had ever encountered or tried to speak and tried to read. So I was apprehensive and not to the point where I didn't end up going, but I was more nervous going there from what I recall than going anywhere else, simply because of the language, that it just looks differently. The alphabet was completely different from anything I was familiar with and everything. But when I got there, it was a surprising number of people like spoke English, and those who didn't speak English or Spanish we're very open and we're very welcoming. And so my fears ended up being for nothing, really. So that just taught me that language can be a barrier, but if you are open-minded, open, welcoming, and respectful, it doesn't have to be.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. So we've only got a few minutes to go. Now, my daughter helped me with some of the questions that I've asked you, and I'm going to ask you a question that she asked, and I'm going to ask you to give me like a really quick answer to it. And so she said, how do you get your readers interested in the destination, and what sort of words do you use to make them excited about it? So I think what she means is, like, let's have you tell us some of your favorite adjectives to describe the places that you've written about. So as we've only got a couple of minutes to go, just really quickly, just give me one or two of your favorite adjectives. Let's go to Emma first.
Seriously, can you go to somebody else first?
It's meant to be a quick fire thing.
I know, I have to work so hard on adjectives. I really do. I really have to work so hard. Oh man, there are so many, and I'm sorry, I can't answer the question with just a couple of adjectives, but we'll answer. It's not just in a couple of adjectives. It's in a sentence that just puts people in a place that is not where they're at. And if you get that in the first sentence, then they might read the second. Yeah. And if you keep that momentum going, and you get that at the end of the chapter where they go, I want to know what's going on next, then you're on a roll.
Awesome. I think that's just, yeah, exactly.
Tell her I love her though.
Pardon?
Tell her I love her though as well, because it's a great question.
She's wise beyond her years.
Absolutely.
Catherine, can you tell us any of your favorite adjectives?
I would say fun and alive, and that describes more the description than it does the actual location. But as soon as you can make a location living, then I think you got the reader.
Fab. Fiona, what about you?
For me, I usually just start talking about the food right away. So adjectives are, I mean, I use them, of course, but when I start talking about the cherry tarts in Croatia and the rice of Spain and just things like that, then I'm automatically interested myself. And so typically my readers are also like, oh, what else do they eat? What else? That sounds so amazing and delicious. And so that's where it is, like delicious, juicy, sweet, bitter, like all those things.
And when you
splatter on the first page and bring them in. Yeah.
And when you talk about food, that instantly gives people kind of the smell and like the sound of food cooking, and like the bubble of a cafe. So it gives you more than just a description, doesn't it? It gives you lots of sensory input.
Absolutely, yes.
Awesome. Bray, what about you?
Yeah, I think actually, Emma, it goes with what you just said. It's, for me, I try to use all five senses. Mm-hmm. So I try to bring in all five that I can use right away with, the smells and the textures. Food is obviously huge, depending on where you are. And sunshine, in case I haven't mentioned it yet. A nice blue cloudless sky with no rain.
Oh, that would be nice, wouldn't it?
It would.
Okay, I think we have come to the end of our session on travel writing. And I'm really sorry if you asked questions that didn't get answered. If any of our panel want to have a look through the comments section after we've stopped being live and maybe answer anything that you're inspired to answer. I'm sure there were a few questions that we didn't get to, but thank you very much to all our panelists for giving us a little kind of trip away from our four walls for 45 minutes. So Yep, thank you very much.
Thanks,
And
Emma.
Thanks.
I hope that you're all going to carry on listening to the panels and readings this evening and tomorrow. So, bye-bye.
Definitely will. Thank
Yeah,
you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.